Last night during the live show over at Timcast IRL, towards the end of the show, we got word that not only, we already knew this, the FBI raided Project Veritas, but not only had they raided them, they had seized privileged legal communications and were leaking them to the New York Times. I won't mince words. Project Veritas is involved in a lawsuit against the New York Times for defamation. For the FBI to provide privileged legal communications to the New York Times, it goes to show you that whatever you want to call the cold civil war, the cultural civil war, it has escalated beyond what many people ever expected possible. And they say things like, it can't happen here. It's happening now. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, under dubious pretext, raided the home of James Okeefe while he's partially clothed, cuffing him and seizing his electronic devices, taking his private, privileged legal communications. Let me just stress, you want to make an argument about a crime being committed? People have a right to confidence between their lawyers. The communications were leaked to the New York Times. The only possible source was the FBI, as many other personalities have attested to. The FBI seized these communications, and all of a sudden the New York Times says, following a raid by the FBI, documents were seized and we've reviewed them. So they're being leaked to the FBI. I warned yesterday in a very heated rant. They'll come for you. There is no hiding. You think that complying with tyranny will get you out of it. No, it will only make it worse. And if history has taught us anything, it's that no matter who you are, from the lowliest homeless man on the streets to the mightiest media mogul, the machine will come for you. You may one day find yourself a humble gas station clerk. And I mean that with all due respect, just working a humble job where you're running a register and selling goods and helping people fuel their vehicles. And then one day someone makes an accusation against you because they don't like you to the Gestapo, the FBI. And the next thing you know is they're kicking your door in and they're stealing your legal communications with your lawyer, providing it to journalists. I've already seen signs of this in Western countries. I saw this in Sweden when local news outlets gained access to hacked communications, comment sections on websites, and then went to the homes of individuals and threatened them, basically like, we're going to publish your name and come after you unless you bend the knee. We've already seen CNN go after people for posting memes. But now we can see how serious the deep state, the bureaucratic state, whatever it is, we can see just how dirty it is. They're going after opposition journalists. Project Veritas, of course, has been doing investigations into corrupt law enforcement, and this is how they stop it. We are, as a country, in the territory of the Soviet Union, the fascist states, the authoritarian states of history. You thought it couldn't happen here. My friends, this story I will give you now, it's here. And people are cheering for it. Now, many leftists, many progressives realize the danger in a rogue FBI targeting journalists, even if they don't want to concede that Project Veritas is a journalist. But many on Twitter are still celebrating the authoritarian rise. These are people who claim to be anti-fascist. They're fascists. So I will stress to you before we begin to read the saga that is the egregious violation of constitutional rights and illegal activity from a rogue FBI, which has been bad for some time, mind you. I will remind you, there was a man whose home was protested by Black Lives Matter. The police arrested him. There was a home that had nothing to do with the disappearance of two girls, and Black Lives Matter activists set fire to it twice. There will come a time when law enforcement, be it police or federal, come to your home and kick your teeth in over some dubious accusation, and they'll do it with a smile on their face. Because we've already seen the police officers in New York defend the Black Lives Matter mural, which was painted illegally. There was no permit to paint a message on a street in opposition to Donald Trump in front of Donald Trump's building. And 27 police officers, I believe, arrested those who dared to defy the despots. The police will, to a great degree, law enforcement will, to a great degree, come to your home while your children are eating breakfast. They will bash the skull in of your son, and they will drag him out while you beg and scream and have no idea what's going on. And if you think I'm wrong, then you haven't read history. I'm not saying all cops are bad. That's stupid. I think the police are good. But the good cops are quitting. And the FBI is rogue, period. I'm not just going to talk to you about James O'Keefe. I'm going to talk to you about January 6th. I'm going to talk to you about Russiagate. We are at the line. But I'll stress. The act of desperation in going after James O'Keefe shows how terrified they really are. You see, if they were in complete control and had the power that many assume they had, they wouldn't need to do this. They'd simply spy on James O'Keefe, collect what information they needed. No, they're panicking because the establishment is faltering and it is collapsing. And that means we must hold our ground and be peaceful, persuasive, and resourceful. As more and more elections begin to swing for American first individuals and populists, be it progressive in some regards or otherwise, we see that the deep state, the administrative state, the bureaucratic state is in full-on panic mode. And as Project Veritas, they exposed Epstein. Now, there's great work done by Miami Herald investigative reporter and Mike Cernovich, but also a light was shown on how the media covered up for Epstein. I don't think the feds wanted to have to deal with that. Let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member to get access to exclusive members-only segments on the Timcast IRL podcast. And with your membership, you are helping us do a lot. 2 nonprofits, one creating technology that will help guard you from censorship, free, open source technology to give you the ability to remain on social media and never be censored. And another to fact check the liars in the media. Both will have launched, but they will enter full swing after the new year for tax purposes. And you're also helping fund journalists. The goal of all of this, what we're doing with Timcast, is not infinity pools and owning our own private jets or anything. The money that you give is going into investing in these projects, culture building, challenging the lies and manipulations, defending freedom and liberty, and spreading that ideology of freedom, personal responsibility, life, liberty, and happiness. Thank you for your support in that regard. And now let's all support James O'Keefe as the administrative state goes rogue and tries to shut him down. Now, this is pathetic on the part of the FBI. It is desperate. And dare I say, desperation is a horrible stench. You see, when you are desperate, you make mistakes. And it seems that perhaps Project Veritas is engaging in an investigation that's going to really expose someone naughty. And it could be that they had no choice but to take the most risky and dramatic action. But now I wonder, as Project Veritas continues their lawsuit with the New York Times, and the New York Times reveals they have access to Project Veritas's legal privileged communications, well, that's a very, very stupid thing to do. Because now Project Veritas might be able to get access to that information. New York Times, how did you get our privileged legal communications? Oh, and they can try and make arguments about we'll protect our sources and whatever. But a judge could say, no, this is private legal communications. Like, this is privileged. This is a core constitutional right. Veritas may actually be able to file for defamation charges and then get discovery and discover who the FBI agents are that leaked this information. I want to start with the core of what happened from November 7th. This sure looks like Biden's Department of Justice persecuting an opposition journalist from the editorial board of the New York Post. They say you don't have to be a fan of James O'Keefe's style of journalism to be worried about how the government is reacting to it. The FBI and Manhattan federal prosecutors are investigating the case of Ashley Biden's diary. The president's daughter says it was stolen in a burglary last year. An obscure right-wing website wound up publishing what it says are pages from it about 10 days before the election. Okeefe says someone shopped the diary to his Project Veritas, claiming Biden had left it somewhere. His outfit didn't use it, in part because it couldn't verify it. He says he informed law enforcement of the whole thing. But he has some ties to the outfit that did publish, which seems to be why feds raided the homes of several current or former Veritas employees before dawn in O'Keefe's own case. He's outraged the feds urged him not to go public with the subpoenas, but someone dropped a dime to the New York Times, which started calling for comment an hour after the first raids Thursday morning. Journalists can't be prosecuted for publishing stolen materials unless they were part of the theft, and the theft in question seems to rise to a federal crime. Shield laws normally mean law enforcement can't make reporters reveal a thing about their sources, even if they didn't publish anything. Journalists regularly publish materials that had been leaked or even taken. Consider the Times running President Donald Trump's tax return. Unless the feds know something about Veritas' sanctioning the burglary, the diary does not warrant pre-dawn raids. It has all the marks of a political vendetta. That's not at all a good look for a Biden Justice Department, already in ill repute for intimidating parents who just asked questions at school board meetings. That was the initial report. The initial report that raids occurred on James Okeefe and his staff, and the New York Times got advanced word, meaning somebody told the New York Times the raids were happening. It gets worse. In a new story from the New York Times, we have two journalists, Adam Goldman and Mark Mazzetti. They write, Project Veritas and the line between journalism and political spying. Documents show how the conservative group worked with lawyers to gauge how far its deceptive reporting practices could go before running afoul of federal laws. Now, this is what's called false framing. All news organizations have legal departments. In fact, when I worked for an ABC News company, they instructed me to talk with lawyers about the legalities of reports we had done. That is to say, if the New York Times is being fair and correct, I can state definitively that ABC News and Univision regularly meet with lawyers to gauge how far they can go before breaking the law. Now, that's a ridiculous framing. Journalists are just trying to make sure they're not going to get sued or charged if they cross certain lines. Why? Well, some states have one, two, or all party consent. For what James Okeefe does, undercover reporting, it's probably common that he goes to his lawyer and says, if I go to California and secretly record someone, am I in violation of the law? And the lawyer will then say California as a two-party consent state, yada, yada, yada. That is to say that, of course, he's talking with his lawyers to make sure he doesn't break the law. Why? Because if you operate in different states have different laws. In the article, they say hours after FBI agents searched the homes of two former Project Veritas operatives last week, James Okeefe, the leader of the conservative group, took to YouTube to defend his work as the stuff of responsible ethical journalism. Project Veritas has long occupied a gray area between investigative journalism and political spying. Stop. Full stop. False. That's a lie. Channel 4 in the UK has done undercover sting operations. Undercover journalism has existed for a very, very long time, probably forever. So, no, that's just false framing. That is, in fact, an opinion. To say that Project Veritas is occupying a gray area between journalism and spying is an opinion. Of course, the New York Times won't say that. They say, internal documents obtained by the New York Times reveal the extent to which the group has worked with its lawyers to gauge how far its deceptive reporting practices can go before running afoul of federal laws. The documents, a series of memos written by the group's lawyer, detail ways for Project Veritas sting operations, which typically diverge from standard journalistic practice of employing people who mask their real identities or create fake ones to infiltrate target organizations, to avoid breaking federal statutes such as the law against lying to government officials. Now, it's possible that it wasn't actually the FBI who leaked this. There's a lot of steps in between. We don't know for sure. I think it is reasonable to conclude, however, and in my opinion, that is the case, and thus the thumbnail and title of this video are my opinions. When you have a raid on James Okeefe, and the New York Times gets wind of that raid, someone informed the New York Times the raid occurred. Is it possible the people who got raided and then called the New York Times to let them know it was happening? Sure, but extremely unlikely. Is it possible that someone who is one of these journalists who likely does not have access to privileged communications between Veritas and its lawyers leaked them to the New York Times? Yeah, really unlikely. Is it possible that James Okeefe, likely one of the only individuals with access to privileged communications, leaked them to the New York Times? No, he's currently in a lawsuit with the New York Times. But maybe there's somebody at Veritas who has access to these emails or broke in or did something, and maybe somehow the New York Times gained access to them. Occam's razor suggests, in the absence of evidence, the solution that makes the least amount of assumptions tends to be the correct one. If on more than one occasion the New York Times got access to information pertaining to the FBI, it's likely it's the FBI who's leaking it. And if documents were seized by Project Veritas and We now know that a federal judge ordered them to stop exfiltrating the data, and somehow privileged legal communications ends up in the hands of the New York Times. It is likely the FBI doing it. Again, I will absolutely entertain the possibility it wasn't, but I think most of us believe it is reasonable to conclude that is the case. I want to be fair and make sure I can frame it and make sure you understand. We don't know exactly who did this. Will Chamberlain, he's a lawyer. He tweeted, "The FBI raided Project Veritas on a pretext and is now leaking their privileged communications to the New York Times. This is a scandal." He says, "These are classic privileged communications. Project Veritas asked for a legal opinion on potential journalist activities. That opinion is a privileged communication." No idea what Adam Goldman, NYT, was thinking here. He should be subpoenaed tomorrow and forced to reveal his criminal source. I didn't even think about the fact that Project Veritas is currently in litigation with the New York Times. Makes it all the more appalling that the New York Times would publish Veritas's privileged communications. If the New York Times has these memorandums, why wouldn't it also have Project Veritas's privileged communications that relate directly to Project Veritas's lawsuit against the Times? This is just a massive, massive scandal. The New York Times delenda est. This isn't journalism. This is straight up theft. Hey, Adam Goldman, New York Times, maybe you should have gotten a legal opinion for the in-house lawyers at the Times before you went and published privileged legal advice from an adversarial party. MEAWW states, FBI alleged to have leaked Project Veritas legal memos to New York Times for hit piece. Alleged. The Department of Justice has been accused of tipping off the New York Times about recent raids on Project Veritas's current and former employees. The attorney also suggested federal prosecutors may have leaked the group's legal communications to the newspaper Project Veritas. The undercover group founded by conservative journalist James Okeefe has come under the federal scanner over the alleged theft of a diary belonging to President Joe Biden's daughter. Veritas considered publishing the diary, so we know the details of that. He didn't. During an interview on Fox News Thursday night, O'Keefe's attorney Harmeet Dillon slammed the Times report as a hit piece and demanded to know if the DOJ had leaked the legal memos to the newspaper, which would be deemed an extraordinary and illegal move. "I can't say how the New York Times got this information, but they got it in a way that is illegal and unethical," Dillon told Fox News. "We have a disturbing situation of the U.S. Attorney's Office or the FBI tipping off the New York Times to each of the raids on Project Veritas's current and former employees. We know that because minutes after these raids occurred, they got calls from the New York Times, which was the only journalism outlet that knew about it. And they published this hit piece today, which is really despicable. I don't think I've ever seen this low from the New York Times before. To publish people's private legal communications," she added. "This is a scandal of epic proportions. Every journalist who is not worried about this should hang up their journalism card. And all First Amendment lawyers as well," Dillon insisted. I'd like to send it over to Trevor Timm. Trevor Timm is the executive director, Freedom of the Press. Freedom of the Press. He tweeted, "I'm sorry, but this is worrying from a press freedom perspective. Unless and until DOJ releases evidence Project Veritas was directly involved in the theft, because if there is none, then the raids could very well be a violation of the Privacy Protection Act." He says, "I know I'm going to get 24 replies to this tweet saying, but Okeefe is not a journalist. Read the statute. It doesn't matter. I don't personally like Project Veritas at all. But imagine this was a liberal org under Trump, not a good precedent." And then he says, "Dozens of anger responses to these tweets, but amazingly, no one has called me out for the 2 glaring typos." Someone responded, "Propaganda is not press. Possession of stolen goods is a crime regardless. Real journalists know that. Rare to release evidence before the trial. Another thing real journalists know. Propaganda is press." We don't like it. We don't like when CNN lies. We don't like it when Good Morning America runs the state's witness and allows him to contradict his own under oath testimony to undermine the Rittenhouse trial or the perspective into what's happening. But we allow the freedom of the press, even for those we do not like. So when someone is accused of being propaganda, well, we have to respect the process. The First Amendment, the right to the press, because everyone's got their perspective and opinions, and some people lie, but people are allowed to speak. Lies are protected under the First Amendment to certain degrees. You're not allowed to defame and libel people, but you're allowed to make up some things. I know, it's despicable. I'm not a fan. Possession of stolen goods is not a crime. You see, this is what these people don't, they don't know or they don't care. Either way, they are cogs in a machine cranking out evil. If Project Veritas, through protected journalistic practices, came across privy to information or something stolen, then they go to their lawyers and they have conversations about what they do. And ultimately, Project Veritas turned it over to law enforcement. They did not publish it. They said, hey, this should go to the feds, or I believe local police. And apparently they're being accused of transporting stolen goods over state lines. I do not believe that Project Veritas did anything wrong in this capacity. But you can see when you're engaging in the act of journalism, they will come for you. Let's talk about reality here. This is from just a few days ago, after the FBI raids. New York Times deposition tape number 1. Former editorial page editor says he endeavored to consider how readers interpret words in an article, but failed to do that. This is not the worst thing in the world. I don't want to act like this video they've put out from May of 2020 is like the worst thing you'll ever see from a news organization. But the point is that Project Veritas is adversarial to the New York Times. They are currently investigating and exposing corruption, and they are suing the New York Times over defaming them. Lies. A judge actually ruled the New York Times put opinions in their articles about Veritas. Now, I believe the New York Times got a stay on discovery, meaning it's on hiatus or whatever. Then all of a sudden the FBI raids Okeefe. All of a sudden, information about the raids is leaked to the New York Times, who he's suing. And then later, his privileged legal communications gets leaked to the New York Times. I think we've seen enough throughout the past several years to know what's happening. I think actually it's not all bad news. Now, it's horrifying what they're doing to James Okeefe and Project Veritas, and scary, absolutely. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it shows the fear, the panic, the ineptitude, and the desperation of the deep state, of the administrative state, of the rogue political operatives, whatever you want to call it. This was overt. I mean, you want to spy on James Okeefe? No one will know about it. James could come out and say, they're spying on me, and people would say you're crazy. Now James Okeefe comes out and says, they raided my home. They took my lawyer's communications in violation of all constitutional rights and legal rights, your right to counsel and privileged communications. They did that because they're desperate, because they're losing, because they're going to lose. But my friends, the night is always darkest before the dawn. And I don't know if we're heading in the direction of the sun rising. We can make the assumption that the darkest portion of the night has come and dawn will be in only a matter of minutes. Or we could argue this is the sun setting. And you better expect worse. I believe it's fair to say in the next few years, things are going to get very, very bad. Why? Look at what happened in this past election with Virginia and Pennsylvania, Long Island, and New Jersey. The Democrats got obliterated. I mean, they just lost. It was bad. New Jersey almost lost. Some people have questions about what's going on up in New Jersey, but there may be a recount. You look at the state senator in New Jersey who spent only $153 and won. Didn't even really campaign. People just don't want Democrats to win. If people, regular people, come out, vote locally, and win their states, and primary neocons and establishment Republicans for populists, this country will recover. The United States will rebound. Life will get better. But the bureaucratic state will spiral. They will freak out. They will thrash and lash out. And I believe that's what we're starting to see. They're not going to go quietly into the good night. They're not going to give up. They're going to try and retain power by any means necessary. Lying, cheating, and stealing. Now, what happened to Project Veritas is one of the scariest things I've seen so far. It is one of the scariest things. Look, we've seen regular people get arrested by cops in their own homes. We've seen Black Lives Matter get away with killing people. Not all of them. Some of them haven't. We've seen Trump's fecklessness, his unwillingness to invoke the Insurrection Act to stop riots that were occurring over 100 days, sporadically across the country, but in the Pacific Northwest consistently. He did nothing. In the LA riots, you had, I believe, the military, the National Guard was deployed. I think Army, I'm not sure. And they quarantined certain areas where the rioting was out of control. They took action to stop the riots. What I think we're going to see is, in the next few years, next year, I mean, we're about to enter 2022. Campaigning season is going to start beginning for the midterms. And do you think the Democrats are just going to accept losing their power? Do you think the establishment will just roll over and give up? Or do you think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that populist messages do not succeed? Do you think they'll do everything in their power to stop people like James Okeefe and people like me? I certainly think so. I think censorship is just around the corner. In the previous election cycle, early, they go after Paul Joseph Watson, Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, prominent voices that were promoting Donald Trump. Well, there still are prominent voices that are promoting America First, nationalism, populism, whatever, to varying degrees, not completely, or liberty, or anti-woke. The next cycle that will occur is that with Alex Jones and some of these other individuals now banned from most of these platforms, they'll find new targets. They'll go after Steven Crowder, and they have been. They have been going after Steven Crowder. Strike after strike after strike. Even when he just cites the CDC, they're like, looking for an excuse. Because he's a powerful, prominent voice who's going to help someone like DeSantis or Donald Trump, someone who might actually come in and purge the bureaucratic state, the FBI, for instance. And then, not too far away is the work I'm doing. I don't think I'm in the same reach right now as some higher profile individuals, but we're certainly close enough. And maybe we're worse. We're moderate. Timcast IRL is a mixed bag of opinions from slightly left to conservative to moderate. And that means regular people on the center left or in the middle are going to hear a lot more conservative opinions, and it may sway people, at least away from the far left. And that's a problem for the establishment and the neocons. I mean, you take a look at Project Lincoln. It was never about the party. It was always about the elites who control the system. Project Lincoln claimed to be principled Republicans opposing Trump because he was corrupt. Now that Trump is out, they're just saying, all Republicans are bad. And they're just promoting Democrats because the Democratic Party has become the party of the wealthy elites. And you look at the neocons, they've all rushed over to become Democrats because that is their path to elitism. I bring you now the Daily Mail. Breaking news. Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, now faces criminal contempt of Congress charges for refusing to appear for his January 6th testimony. We had a conversation with Kash Patel, and he was talking about how when you're subpoenaed for these things, it is very, very expensive. And some people can't afford it. You have to go and testify before Congress. You got to get a lawyer. You've got to have legal advice on, what you can and can't talk about. That's very, very expensive. So what happens if you don't have the money? What happens if you can't afford legal representation for something like this? Well, then you're going to get in trouble. You will get in serious trouble. You will be ripped to shreds in these depositions, these hearings. And if you refuse to show up, they will charge you criminally. Mark Meadows is facing criminal contempt charges. Steve Bannon is. The House voted to hold Bannon in contempt. We'll see. But take a look at this. January 6th committee issues 10 more subpoenas, including to Stephen Miller and Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh McEnany? It's not about anything meaningful. What the January 6th committee is doing is using the process as punishment. They're consuming your time, your mind, and your money. They want to make sure you're off base. They want to make sure you can't do work. They want to make sure that by subpoenaing you, they jam you up to a degree where you cannot be effective. That's what they're doing. And they're draining resources because they're funded by the government. They can just do it. The reason I bring this up in the context of James Okeefe is because I believe we are witnessing the rise of the totalitarian state. It's been happening for some time. I mean, 9/11, the Patriot Act, these are all bad things. The NDAA, indefinite detention provision under Barack Obama, all of these things seemingly meaningless. The idea that the government can just say, oh, by the way, we have the right to arrest you in violation of the Constitution. And you're like, no, you don't. That's stupid. You'll never win in court. Then Barack Obama goes and kills some American citizens without charge or trial and says, yeah, well, too bad. And I remember Luke Rutkowski, him from the IRL show. We have him on. He's been a guest on the show frequently. He once interviewed, I believe it was, what's his name, Charlie Gibbs? I could be getting it wrong. Peter Gibbs or whatever. Somebody worked for the Obama administration who said after Obama killed an American citizen, he said, yeah, well, he should have had a better dad. Amazing. I believe is what he said. Should have had a better dad. Barack Obama. No one stopped him. He wasn't charged criminally. Got away with it. That's where we are. And it's escalating. We're now at the point where the feds will go after opposition political factions. James Okeefe doesn't engage in policy debates. He's just got a perspective. It leans conservative. And he goes after everybody. He exposed the Epstein cover-up from ABC. He's exposed nursing home scandals completely unrelated to any political institution because Project Veritas does undercover reporting. And look at WikiLeaks. What do? Journalistic outfit. They receive information. They publish it like any other news organization. And for that, Julian Assange is rotting in prison for what is it going on now? 8 years or so. Well, I should say he was in the Ecuadorian embassy because, he fled. We are dealing with evil. They've seized power of our institutions a long time ago. And not completely, just enough. And good people, good men, did nothing, as the saying goes. So I tell you now, there is a path towards purging the corrupt, and it's very, very simple. You must be peaceful, persuasive, and resourceful. January 6th was the biggest misstep by Trump and his supporters ever. It gave the establishment all of the fuel they needed to deploy tens of thousands of National Guard and bolster federal law enforcement, and now they're expanding the Capitol Police nationwide. Because violence is a trick. We are not in the 1600s or the 1700s. We're in fourth and fifth generational warfare. Peaceful, persuasive, resourceful tactics are the only that work. You know how I know? Donald Trump won. How did he win? People voted for him. And now you have a narrative that voting is pointless, and that's a lie, and that's wrong. Don't let people make you believe it. Because Youngkin won in Virginia. Is it perfect? No. Is the Republican Party going to save you? No. It's a step in the right direction. It's a victory, a major victory. The next thing you need to pay attention to as we watch this go down, you must vote in your local elections. Find out who your state senator is, who your state rep is. Vote for people who believe in freedom. Win these legislatures, and we get closer to a potential convention of states. Maybe not a perfect solution, but at the very least, your state can then pass laws to protect your rights. Primary the incumbents, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise. Listen, in the Democratic Party of the progressive insurgency, in the Republican Party of the populist insurgency, in the Libertarian Party, you have the Mises Caucus. Change is coming. And I believe we're on track to win. But the night is always darkest before the dawn, which is to say, expect worse. But stay vigilant. Vote locally. Look, the midterms are coming up. Get active in these primaries. And hopefully things don't result in national divorce or anything, violent. Hopefully that never happens. It's already bad enough to see what's happening in the streets in Kenosha and what might happen now with the verdict in the Rittenhouse case. We got to make sure we throw our support behind Project Veritas. So make sure you guys are helping support them. You can go to projectveritas.com and you can make donations to Project Veritas to help them fight their legal battles because they may be one of the only true journalistic enterprises in the United States right now. I hope you're paying attention, and I hope you are speaking out. Or forever hold your peace. Things will get worse. If we all stand up right now, if everyone did, they'd get better overnight. Let's win some elections. Let's take back control of our respective states. Let's primary the incumbent crony establishment and bring in real candidates who represent us and prove the American system works. And we will not let these corrupt cultists destroy it. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.